Vlog, I explore the theories of Jörg Lanz von Liebenfels and Guido von List and the theory of Ariosophy. I've mentioned this in my vlog on the Order of the Nine Angles, or it's called Shropshire, Home to the Darkest Magic. Reputedly, Jörg Lanz von Liebenfels had contact with a young Adolf Hitler, but Hitler was probably not a disciple as Liebenfels claimed. But my interest is the influence of these theories had on the Nazi regime, which is far from clear. The term Ariosophy, which translates to the wisdom of the Aryans, was invented by Lanz von Liebenfels in 1915, and during the 1920s it became the name of his doctrine. Nevertheless, List actually called his doctrine Armanism, whilst Lanz used the terms Theozoology and Ario-Christianity. The ideas of List and Liebenfels were part of a general occult revival that occurred in Austria and Germany during the late 19th and early 20th century. This needs to be contextualised against the Austro-Prussian War, which resulted in Austria and southern Germany being excluded from the North German Confederation. Not only were ethnic Germans in Austria left isolated, but increasingly they were being undermined by other ethnicities within the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But also the creation of the North German Federation was marked by a search for a common German identity. This was a revival that was loosely inspired by historical Germanic paganism, holistic philosophy and Christianity, as well as esoteric concepts that were influenced by German Romanticism and Theosophy. The connection between this form of German mysticism and historical Germanic culture is evident in the mystical fascination with runes, in the form of Guido von List's Aryan runes. Guido Carl Anton List, 5th of October 1848 to 17th of May 1919, better known as Guido von List, was an Austrian occultist, journalist, playwright and novelist. He expounded a modern pagan new religious movement known as Wotanism, which he claimed was a revival of the religion of the ancient German race. The Battle of Teutoburg Forest and the histories of Tacitus had a big effect on 19th century German nationalism. In the 19th century, the Germans were still divided into many states, but they linked themselves with the Germanic tribes as shared ancestors of one German people. List's vision of the Battle of Teutoburg Forest set him off on a quest to glorify the German race, albeit that these ancient tribes probably had no racial connection to 19th century Germans. List believed that while Wotanism expounded polytheism for the wider population, those who were members of the Armanistic elite were aware of the reality of monotheism. List's Armanism would later be classified as a form of Ariosophy. List's early theosophical influence came largely from the writings of German theosophist Max Ferdinand Sebald von Werth, who combined theosophical ideas with his own interpretation of German mythology and emphasis on racial doctrines, thus anticipating Ariosophy. In later work, his theosophical influence over List's thinking grew, and he began referencing works such as Helena Blavatsky's The Secret Doctrine and William Scott Elliott's The Lost Lemuria in his publications. He expressed the view that Norse mythology accorded with and thus provided the cosmological teachings of Theosophy. List believed that the basic teachings of Wotanism were found in the runic alphabet, believing that these could be deciphered by linking these letters with particular runic spells which appeared in the Old Norse Havamar. He claimed to have deciphered these secret meanings himself, translating them as statements such as "Know yourself," "Then you know everything," "Do not fear death, he cannot kill you," and "Marriage is the root of the Aryan race," and "Man is one with God." List emphasised the importance of a mystical union between humans and the universe, viewing divinity as being immanent in nature, with all life being an emanation of it. Connected to this, he believed in a close identification with the racial group, the Volk or folk of the natural world. List believed that human beings had an immortal soul, and that this would be reincarnated according to the laws of karma until everything eventually uniting with divinity. List believed that the degradation of modern Western society was a result of conspiracy orchestrated by a secret organisation known as the Great International Party, an idea influenced by anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Adopting a millenarianist perspective, he believed in the imminent defeat of this enemy and the establishment of a better Aryo-German race. In April 1916, he welcomed the start of World War I as a conflict that would bring about the defeat of Germany's enemies and the establishment of a golden age for the Aryo-German Empire. The ideology regarding the Aryan race, in the sense of Indo-Europeans, runic symbols, the swastika, and sometimes occultism, are important elements of Ariosophy. By 1899, and at the earliest, or by 1900 at latest, esoteric notions entered Guido von List's thoughts. These Aristotelic ideas, together with and influenced by Theosophy, contributed significantly to an occult counterculture in Germany and Austria. Jörg Lanz, 19th of July 1874 to 22nd of April 1954, also known under his pseudonym as Jörg Lanz von Liebenfels, was an Austrian political and racial theorist and occultist who was a pioneer of Ariosophy. That he felt the need to use a pseudonym echoes his somewhat unreliable autobiographical accounts, attempting to create a noble lineage for himself. But we know that he was a former monk and founder of the magazine Astara, in which he published anti-Semitic and Volkish theories. Liebenfels, along with many at the time, was strongly influenced by eugenics. This was first formulated by Edward Galton in 1883, directly drawing on recent work delineated natural selection by his half-cousin Charles Darwin. He published his observations and conclusions chiefly in his influential book, Inquiries into Human Faculty and Its Development. The first to systematically apply Darwin's theory to human relations, Galton believed that various desirable human qualities were also hereditary ones, although Darwin strongly disagreed with his elaboration of this theory. Shocking though the implications of eugenics, especially as applied in Nazi Germany, most countries were enthusiastic regarding eugenics, especially the USA. In 1905, he published his book, Theozoology oder die Kunst von den Sodoms Affingen und den Goten Elektron, Theozoology, or the science of the sodomite apelings and of divine electron, in which he advocated sterilisation of the sick and lower races, as well as forced labour for castrated chandals and the glorified and glorified the Aryan race as Gottmenschen, Godmen. Liebenfels justified his esoteric racial ideology by attempting to give it a biblical foundation. According to him, Eve, whom he described as being the initial being, involved herself with a demon and gave birth to the lower races in the process. He claimed that this led to blonde women being attracted primarily to dark men, something that could only be stopped by racial demixing, so that the Aryan Christian master humans could once again rule the dark-skinned beastmen and ultimately achieve divinity. And to quote him from Theozoology, why do you seek hell in the next world? Is it not hell in which we live and which burns inside us sufficiently dreadful? In addition to biblical origins, Liebenfels mentions Herodotus in his publications, and that Herodotus had written about ape-like creatures, maybe bridging the gap between humans and animals. Also from Herodotus, he writes about human-like creatures and dwarves living in marshy areas around the Mediterranean. Herodotus also mentions numerous cults associated with animals. Dwarves and goats are believed to have copulated with human females. Indeed, Liebenfels spends some considerable time exploring human-animal beast breeding. Even more bizarrely, Liebenfels' interpretation, following the discovery of the black obelisks of the Syrian Salsamasar III. The black obelisk of Salsamasar is a black limestone Neo-Assyrian sculpture with many scenes in bas-relief and inscriptions. It comes from Nimrod, ancient Cthulhu, in northern Iraq, and commemorates the deeds of King Shelshamar III, who reigned from 858 to 824 BC. It features 20 relief sections, five on each side. They depict 5 different subdued kings, bringing tributes and prostrating before the Neo-Assyrian king. Each scene occupies 4 panels around the monument and is described by cuneiform script above them. Liebenfels claims that it depicts 2 humanoid beings. It probably comes as no surprise that Liebenfels interprets these as evidence of breeding. Thus, Liebenfels develops a theory that the Aryan race had been weakened by blood from these lowest ranking species. That the Aryans and these hybrids can be found in varying proportions over the world. Because we all contain a mix of these species, we have a constant battle between them and their impact on our behaviour. Furthermore, the Old Testament represents a covenant between the Aryans and God to exterminate these hybrids. The Order of the New Templars, Ordo Novi Templi, ONT, was a proto-fascist secret society in Germany founded by Liebenfels in 1900. It was modelled after the Catholic military order of the Knights Templar and similar in its hierarchical structure to the Order of Cistercians, of which Liebenfels had been a member. His order only admitted those who satisfied his racist concepts of Nordic purity. The Thule Society originated as an offshoot of the German Norden in 1917 and notoriously became associated with the Deutsche Arbeiterparty in 1990 and thus involved in the formative phase of the Nazi Party. By the rise of the Third Reich in 1933, the Thule Society had been dissolved, and esoteric organisations, including Völkische occultists, were suppressed by the Nazi regime. Many closed down by anti-Masonic legislation in 1935. Nevertheless, some elements of Germanic mysticism found reflection in the symbolism employed by the Nazis, mostly due to Heinrich Himmler's interest in the occult and sponsorship of the Austrian Ariosophy Carl Wilgert. As early as 1940, the occult scholar and folklorist Louis Spence identified a neo-pagan undercurrent in Nazism, for which he largely blamed Alfred Rosenberg, and which he equated with Satanism. Thus it was probably more the influence of Ariosophy on the Thule Society which influenced the Nazis, more so than directly. Himmler's race theories, Volkisch predilection, and pre-Christian occult spirituality were ultimately compatible with Hitler's and the Nazi Party's race theory. They all espoused ideological basis for Aryan race superiority, romanticism for Volkisch agrarianism, strident anti-Semitism, and an orientation towards the esoteric and occult. Nevertheless, the notion of Nazi occultism has been relativized as superficial. In Hamburg, which was considered a stronghold, only 0.49% of the inhabitants identified as belonging to the neo-pagan faith movement in 1937. British academic Nicholas Goodrick-Clarke wrote The Occult Roots of Nazism in 2005. It's in this publication that he refutes the crypto-history that has developed around Nazi occult. Certainly, Liebenfels was influenced by Theosophy with its root races, and indeed Guido von List, but more recent crypto-history has suggested some bizarre influences. Nevertheless, Goodrick-Clarke argues that there were links between some ideals of Ariosophy and Nazi ideology, and as to quote him, semi-religious beliefs in a race of Aryan godmen, the needed examination of inferiors, and a wonderful millennial future of a German world dominated by Hitler, Himmler, and many other high-ranking Nazi leaders. I might add that amongst those accused of crypto-history is ex-Manchester Grammar School boy Michael Wood, and someone whom I have a lot of time for. Given that I'm somewhat preoccupied with the occult influences of Nazi Germany, I cannot be sure that I've not been influenced by some of these inaccuracies in my vlogs, for which I profusely apologise. Certainly I'm aware of how my own occult thinking has been influenced by some of these myths, although probably originating in Theosophy. But should we not be asking ourselves, what is the origin of these inaccuracies? In my vlog on the Nine Angles, Shropshire home of the darkest magic, I expressed my opinion that the organisation does not seem to have developed organically, that maybe the myth of their creation was developed by some far-right groups or even security services. I have to conclude that these myths have a similar origin. Indeed, such misrepresentation target the supposed misdeeds of Freemasons, Kabbalah and Rosicrucianism in order to prove the modern world was based on false and even principles. After all, how else can we explain the current popularity of such bizarre and repulsive theories? Of course, I am myself a mystic and a romantic, and this is not the first time I have found a resonance with my beliefs before they abruptly and violently diverge. I do appreciate a good metaphor, but the whole notion of Ariosophy is to take literally that which is clearly allegorical and then engage in a flight of fancy to explain them.